Bob Dylan started out singing other people's songs, but as he says, there came a point where I had to write what I wanted to say because what I wanted to say, nobody else was writing. So born in Hibbing, Minnesota, a town, he says, where you couldn't be a rebel, it was too cold. Bob moved to New York at age 19. By the time he was 23, Bob's voice, with its weight, its unique gravelly power, was redefining not just what music sounded like, but the message it carried and how it made people feel. Today, everybody from Bruce Springsteen to U2 owes Bob a debt of gratitude. There is not a bigger giant in the history of American music. All these years later, he's still chasing that sound, still searching for a little bit of truth, and I have to say that I am a really big fan.
Bob Dylan.
Come on, Bob.
There are thousands of facts that support the fact that Bob Dylan is a plagiarist. It would be impossible to cite all the details in a 2-hour movie. One fact we do want to cite is the most important fact, and that is that it has been reported by Reuters that at the age of 16, Bob Dylan was already a plagiarist and knew the value of plagiarizing songs. Quoting Reuters, a poem written by a teenage Bob Dylan and up for auction at Christie's is actually a song written by the late Canadian country singer Hank Snow. Christie's announced on Tuesday the sale of the handwritten poem, believed to have been written in 1957 when Dylan was 16 and away at Jewish camp. The words, with a few minor variations, match those of a song previously recorded by Snow, who died in 1999 at the age of 85. Christie's said in a statement, "Additional information has come to our attention about the handwritten poem submitted by Bob Dylan to his camp newspaper, written when he was 16, entitled Little Buddy. The words are in fact a revised version of lyrics of a Hank Snow song." In 1996, James Damiano posted the findings of his lawsuit against Bob Dylan on the internet and received over 8 million hits. It was at this time that Bob Dylan's musical works were called into question, and the origin of his songs started to be scrutinized by critics. These critics included music reporters, editors of music magazines and newspapers, thousands of facts that support the fact that Bob Dylan is a plagiarist. His fans were astute in evaluating his duplicity concerning his material, and came to learn one fact that 80% of the melodies and lyrical hooks of his songs were plagiarized. And that is that it has been reported by Reuters that at the age of 16, Bob Dylan was already a plagiarist. The times are and knew the value of plagiarizing Hard rain's songs. Gonna fall. Quoting Reuters, a poem written by a teenage Bob Dylan and up for auction at Christie's is actually a song written by the late Canadian country singer Hank Snow. Christie's announced on Tuesday the sale of the handwritten poem, believed to have been written in 1957 when Dylan was 16 and away at Jewish camp. The words, with a few minor variations, match those of a song previously recorded by Snow, who died in 1999 at the age of 85. Christie's said in a statement, "Additional information has come to our attention about the handwritten poem submitted by Bob Dylan to his camp newspaper, written when he was 16, entitled Little Buddy. The words are in fact a revised version of lyrics of a Hank Snow song. In 1996, James Damiano posted the findings of his lawsuit against Bob Dylan on the internet and received over 8 million hits. It was at this time that Bob Dylan's musical works were called into question, and the origin of his songs started to be scrutinized by critics. These critics included music reporters, editors of music magazines and newspapers, college professors, and literary people. His fans were astute in evaluating his duplicity concerning his material. Someday, and came to learn that 80% of the melodies and lyrical hooks of his songs say the greatest line. Give the greatest performance. These songs included Blowin In The Wind, Like a Rolling Stone, The Times Are A-Changin', Hard Rain's Gonna Fall, Knocking on Heaven's Door, Rita May, and many more, including his Grammy-nominated hit, Dignity. Comments were being published, such as, quote, "I was watching a Pete Seeger documentary recently that featured his performance of I Dreamed I Saw Joe Hill Last Night, and I couldn't believe the similarity of the two lyrics. The phrasing and the cadence of these lines were exactly the same, except replacing St. Augustine for Joe Hill Last Night. I already knew Dylan writes this way. There are other more apparent examples of Dylan taking a phrase or sentence or song and reappropriating it for his own uses, such as rolling and tumbling off Modern Times. Just to be clear, I don't find this controversial at all. That's simply how folk music works. But after hearing Joe Hill, I'm starting to realize that there might be many more examples of this that I'm completely unaware of. Do you know of any?" As this avalanche of evidence started to bury Dylan, he hid like a cornered weasel behind corrupt lawyer, judges, and journalists who covered up his massive affinity for plagiarism. The heat got so bad that he had to answer in some fashion. When asked what he thinks of people who charge him with plagiarizing songs, Dylan replied, "Wussies and pussies complain about that stuff."
Bob Dylan is sick and tired of his critics. In an interview with Rolling Stone, the 71-year-old folk rock icon, who has just released his 35th studio album, addressed charges of plagiarism, calling his critics wussies and pussies for claiming he was stealing from the works of others. In 2006, the New York Times accused Dylan of borrowing from a Civil War-era poet on his Modern Times album, and the Wall Street Journal claimed Dylan's 2001 record Love and Theft had very similar phrasing to a 1995 biography of a Japanese mobster. Dylan claims that in folk and jazz, quotation is a rich and enriching tradition, and he compared the accusations to folk fans calling him Judas when he started to play the electric guitar on stage for the first time in the early 1960s. No doubt some will examine Dylan's latest album, Tempest, for its authenticity. But in his latest interview, Dylan has a few choice words for his harshest critics. They can rot in hell.
Also, Dylan recently, in a Los Angeles Times interview, admitted to plagiarism by definition. In a 2004 interview with Robert Hilburn of the Los Angeles Times, Bob Dylan stated, "Well, you have to understand that I'm not a melodist. My songs are either based on old Protestant hymns or Carter family songs. What happens is, I'll take a song and simply start playing it in my head. That's the way I meditate. I wrote Blowin In The Wind in 10 minutes. Just put words to an old spiritual, probably something I learned from Carter family records. The Times They Are A-Changin' is probably from an old Scottish folk song. I'll be playing Bob Nolan's Tumbleweeds, for instance, in my head constantly, while talking to a person or sitting around, whatever. People will think they are talking to me, and I'm talking back, but I'm not. I'm listening to the song in my head. At a certain point, some of the words will change and I'll start writing a song. End quote, Bob Dylan. If you as an audience believe that Bob Dylan deserves credit as being the most revered songwriter in the world, after admitting that his formula for writing songs is simply changing the words to a pre-existing melody of a pre-existing song, then maybe we should discuss the fact that when Bob Dylan changed the words of the melody line from "No More Auction Block" to make Blowin In The Wind, he knew who the author was, yet never gave her credit on his album. The proof of this is the actual label of the album printed on the record. That states, written by Bob Dylan. Please keep in mind that the authors to the melodies that Dylan stole were never credited, including the author of the melody line to the song, Don't Think Twice. All the information in this movie has been submitted to Federal District Judge Jerome B. Simandl. Find the greatest find.
This is the videotape deposition of Elliott, Mintz in the matter of Damiano versus Sony Music and Bob Dylan.
Have you ever lied to Mr. Damiano?
Yes.
Good evening, my name is Christine Boutsikaris. I'm being filmed tonight to tell you about the most controversial story in the history of rock and roll. The stealing of James Damiano's songs by Bob Dylan. It's uncontested by Bob Dylan and his law firms, all five, that Bob Dylan and people in Bob Dylan's entourage have solicited songs, music and lyrics written by James Damiano for a period of over 10 years and 11 months. I'd like to say that I was one of Bob Dylan's biggest fans and followed his career my entire life. After learning of his stealing of James Damiano's songs and the cover-up, I've lost all respect for him as an artist and a human being. Especially after learning that Bob refused to return James Damiano's entire song catalog after the lawsuit, songs that took James over 42 years of his life to write. One that comes to mind is, quote, "Racism, a diversion of reality. That the worst segregation in the world today is not between yellow, red, black, or white men, Muslims, Jews, or Christians, but between the rich and the poor." The following testimony is of a man named Tony Tiller, who worked in the office of the most powerful executive at CBS headquarters in New York. Chronologically, this deposition is a little premature. However, Mr. Tiller's position in reference to this story will be explained in more detail at a later time in the movie.
New York, New York. I will be the videographer for today. Today's date is 6/6/96. And this is the case of James Damiano versus Sony Music Entertainment Incorporated and Bob Dylan. And the case number is 95-4795. We're here at the offices of Parcher and Hayes, located at 500 Fifth Avenue, New York, New York. And this is a deposition of Tony Tiller. This time counsel will identify themselves.
Stephen Kramer for the plaintiff.
Orange Snyder and Ruth Lott for Sony Music Entertainment, Inc. and Bob Dylan.
At this time, I have the court reporter swear in the witness.
Raise your right hand, sir. Do you swear in the testimony you're about to give that you will tell the whole truth, so help you God?
Yes, I do.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Mr. Tiller, good morning. You are employed by whom, sir?
Sony Music.
And how long have you been employed by Sony Music?
For 9 years on staff, 10 years if you count approximately a year and 2 months as temp/per diem. I was promoted to Associate Director of Marketing Services.
Did you ever have in your office any compilations of any sort of Mr. Damiano's songs that you kept on your bookshelf?
When you say compilation, what?
A folder, binder, book,
Printed
tablet,
material.
Anything?
Printed material, yes.
Okay, and draw, if you would, so I can picture it, and the jury can picture it, a verbal picture of your office, and then, if you do that, where the material rested.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, so the record's clear. Are we talking about, because you may have had more than one office over the course of the years, so you might want to...
Sure, if you had more than one office, take me through it.
Okay, when I first started as a temp, I moved from office to office to cover for people who were on vacation. So
Okay, just to speed it up a touch, perhaps. If you would, Mr. Tiller, limit yourself to the offices in which these materials were ever located.
Okay, my first office, I had, the door would be, say, in that corner. Over here, I had 2 file cabinets, a table, a small table to my left attached to my desk, an art desk in that corner, a bookcase right next to that, and next to that a file cabinet.
Okay, thank you.
The book that Jim had given me would be on that bookcase.
To your right.
To my right.
Okay. And what year did you receive that book initially?
I don't recall.
Okay, and what did it have in it?
It had A bunch of songs, or a bunch of, I guess, well, he called them songs, so I called them songs, but they were words written in verse form.
Was it in a binder, a folder?
It was in a binder.
Like a 3-ring binder?
3-ring binder.
And where is that today?
I do not know.
When was the last time you saw it?
When we were in the CBS building at 52 West 52nd Street.
And you're telling us and the jury you don't know what happened to those materials of songs or words?
No, I do not.
Just disappeared?
Well, when we moved from that building approximately 4 or 5 years ago, I explained to Jim, we were to pack our own desks. We were pressed to work until the day we moved, pretty much. And the movers came in and packed everything else. There were things that were left behind.
And so could you pinpoint, Mr. Tiller, what year Mr. Damiano's book of songs or words disappeared from your office?
You did not say disappeared. You're mischaracterizing his testimony. You did not say they disappeared.
So
Well, if you mischaracterize the testimony...
Oh, that's an exception to our stipulation? So that means during Mr. Mintz's deposition, every time you... Did Mr. Damiano's songs, Mr. Tiller, disappear?
Could I have you rephrase that?
Sure. What happened to his songs that had been on your shelf for how long?
1.5, possibly 2 years.
Okay. The songs, or that binder, without... That binder disappeared, did it not?
They were left in the building when we moved.
And did you ever go back to retrieve it or to ask where it was?
No, I did not. There were...
And is that building still owned by CBS? Counsel, this is the second witness in a row, literally, who received materials from the plaintiff comprising one or more of his songs, where the materials have disappeared, whether you want to use the word disappeared, lost, destroyed, evaporated, whatever phrase you want to use. And I want the record to note that this is the second witness in a row. Mr. Mintz testified that he destroyed Mr. Damiano's fax materials. And no, not only did he destroy them, he went further. He said he shredded them.
Mm-hmm.
And now Mr. Tiller is saying that the binder of materials of songs that Mr. Tiller received got lost, disappeared, don't exist. And I want that to be clear that that has occurred.
Let me now respond, sir.
Sure.
Your insinuation.
No insinuation, it's a statement of fact.
Yes, the facts speak for themselves, and your...
This is the videotape deposition of Elliott, Mintz in the matter of Damiano versus Sony Music and Bob Dylan. Today's date is May 30th, 1996, and the time is 3:01 p.m. This recording is taking place at 9606 Santa Monica Boulevard in Beverly Hills, California. My name is Jeff Minger, a notary public in the state of California. I represent Kearns & Gradill's Video Services, located at 9320 Wilshire Boulevard in Beverly Hills, California. This deposition is being videotaped on behalf of the plaintiff. I'm neither counsel for, employed by, or related to any party in this action, nor am I interested in the outcome thereof. Counsel, please introduce yourselves and state your appearances.
Stephen Kramer for the plaintiff.
Orrin Snyder, and soon to be joined by Stephen Hayes for Sony Music Entertainment and Bob Dylan.
We are on the record with the court.
Mr. Mintz, have you ever gone by an alias?
Yes.
Okay, and what is that alias, sir?
Mitch Berman.
And during what period of time have you gone under that alias?
From approximately October of 1980 through the present.
What is your profession, sir?
I'm a media consultant.
And how long have you been in that profession?
50 years.
And how long has Mr. Dylan been your client, sir?
Since, I believe, October of 1986, approximately 10 years.
And I take it you're represented today by Mr. Snyder? Is he your counsel?
Yes.
What are your duties, and what have been your duties with Mr. Dylan in the past 10 years, sir?
My duties fall under two basic categories. One is to function as a media relations person or press person between Bob and the media. And
You've spoken with Mr. Damiano?
I have.
Okay. Have you ever lied to Mr. Damiano?
Yes.
And can you list for me the times that you lied to him?
First of all of my conversations with Mr. Damiano were telephonic. To the best of my knowledge, I've never met him. During the course of telephone conversations, you're asking for a specific example.
Just so you're clear on the question, sir.
Yes.
Because you just used a word that indicates to me you may not be clear. So with your permission.
Please.
I'm not looking just for examples. What I'm going to do now is I'm giving you the floor, and I want you to exhaust your recollection and tell the jury every time you lied to Mr. Damiano. And then I'll ask you, have you now exhausted your recollection? So I hear everything now.
Indeed.
Okay, thank you, sir.
To the very best of my recollection, I may have lied to Mr. Damiano when I have told him, I can't talk with you any further, I have another call pending. I would be on the telephone, I would be buzzing, I would tell him something very important has come up, I can't continue this. Many times, not many times, but on those occasions when he would ask me, could I pass on something to Mr. Dylan? I may have said to him, I'll try and pass it along, or words to that effect. These would be the, and of course, my name. By using the name Mitch Berman, that was not being truthful. Those are the only specific, quote, lies or mistruths that come to my mind immediately.
Okay, I take it that in preparation for this deposition, you've read what appears to be transcripts of conversations between yourself and Mr. Damiano?
I have.
Okay, and is that within the past day or two that you've done that? How recently?
I've read portions of the transcripts in the past day or two, but I read his entire booklet a year or two ago.
Okay, but, okay.
The time is 4:23 p.m. and we're back on the record.
Mr. Kramer, you also said to me earlier that if during the course of the deposition anything else occurs to me, I should just break in.
Sure.
Even if it seems out of context.
Sure.
Under the subject of mistruths spoken to your client, during the course of these telephone conversations, he would frequently ask me to pass along information, ask questions about Bob, or to Bob about him. And I, in fact, told him that I would, and that I did.